Gardner, and I'm at Salt Lake Community College. I'm the coordinator of the Student Writing Center here. And today we have Karen Rowan and Laura Greenfield, and they're going to be talking about writing centers and the new racism. Excellent. But we've got quite a crowd here today, and I know you all have lots of things that you want to talk about. But before we get started with that, just a couple of logistic things. If you actually want to get on with your microphone, you just click on the Start Broadcasting button up there on the left. I encourage that because it does tend to create a more fluid discussion. But if you want to stay down in the text portion, feel free to. You don't have to use your camera like we're doing up here. You can just click on the Start Broadcasting button and just select the microphone, and that will let you do that. If you don't want to hear the little pop sound every time you type something or anytime anybody types something in the text box, you click on you click off the little tick that's next to the sounds button, and that will stop that pop sound. Yeah, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? And Laura and Karen, why you, if you want to introduce yourselves, let us know where you're from and maybe your motivations for writing the anthology. I guess we can call it an anthology, right? All right. Go ahead. Pick either one.
I'll get started. I'm Karen Rowan. I am currently at Cal State University in San Bernardino, which is Southern California, about an hour east of LA, and it's a Hispanic serving institution. I'm an assistant professor in the English department and teach tutor education courses as well as in our MA program in composition and undergraduate writing courses. What got me started on the project is before I came to California, I worked at a couple of institutions on the East Coast. First at Trinity University in Washington, D.C., which is a historic women's college with a very multicultural, very diverse student population and a lot of first-generation college students. And from there, I went on to work at Morgan State University, which is a historically black university in Baltimore, and was in the English department and writing center there. And while I was working at these two institutions, I was teaching tutor education courses and working on developing the writing centers there and working with very diverse student populations that I loved working with. And also there was conversations going on in W Center about race and racism in the writing center, and this are the conversations that we reference in our introduction. And when those, and this is my particular background coming to this book, when those conversations first started happening, I didn't have any sense of how I could contribute to the online conversations as well. I was trying to work through how to address the issues that were being raised in the conversations in my context, but I don't feel like I felt any better prepared than a lot of people did for having substantive, meaningful, sustained conversations. So when the second round of conversations hit and I was at Morgan State, I thought, well, we need something more than a listserv conversation. As a field, we need to figure out how to have these conversations. And I was fairly recently done with my PhD, and all of a sudden I had the realization, like, hey, I can do a book. I don't need my dissertation director's permission to do this project. So I went online, I started looking at who was participating in the conversation. I found Laura and thought that she had really smart things to say, and I reached out to her, and from there the collaboration started, and the project kind of took off from there. So that's, yeah.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Laura Greenfield. I have been involved in writing centers since I was an undergraduate at Washington University in St. Louis. I was an undergraduate peer tutor and fell in love with the work, and so when I went to grad school at George Washington University in DC to get my PhD in English, I immediately sought out the Writing Center and became a graduate student tutor there, and after a couple years was promoted to assistant director position. And as I was doing that work and doing my research, my scholarly interests and my daily work-life interests merged, and I knew I wanted to have a career in writing centers. Um, when I finished my degree, I got a position at Mount Holyoke College, which is a small all-women's liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, where I served as the associate director of their leadership center. And my primary charge was to direct a program called the Speaking, Arguing, and Writing Program, which included the Writing Center as well as a Speaking Center and a classroom-based tutoring program. And I loved that work and became so passionate about it that I, in 2011, left Mount Holyoke to pursue my dream of starting a community-based center. And so I now direct a nonprofit organization called Women's Voices Worldwide, which I describe to people in the Writing Center community as a community-based writing center that works on speaking instead of writing. So that's where I am right now. And my story about meeting Karen and starting this book project starts in similar places. I have always been very interested in anti-oppression work. My graduate work was focused on language diversity and anti-oppression education, particularly through the lens of race. I have always been very eager to engage in conversations about race, but like many of us, don't have the perfect answers to how to do it. And so I was, after Victor Villanueva's keynote at the 2005 IWCA and CPTW conference, was very energized by that and participated very actively in the W Center listserv discussion. And was very frustrated by that discussion, as we write about in the introduction. And when Karen reached out to me, I didn't know her, but I was very intrigued and excited by the idea of the project. So it was an easy sell for me to go meet with her, and we hit it off right away and worked really well together. And so it was an exciting project from the beginning.
Yeah, and C. Greenlee asked what the book I held up was, and it's actually Bootstraps. Came out in '93 or '94. Victor Villanueva. He also has the what's the big book called?
Crosstalk. Crosstalk and Composition. Is that the one you're
Yes.
referencing?
Yes, thank you. The Crosstalk and Composition, which I believe came out in a new edition fairly recently, a few years back.
Yeah.
But Kendra, we were talking before you all got here. She arrived early, and I'm going to ask her to kick off the discussion, because she had some. Well, she had a really good discussion point. And unfortunately, Kendra can only be on the text there, so we're going to have to read what she wrote. But why don't you go ahead and get us started, Kendra? And one thing about the text box, it does limit how long your sentence can be. So watch that. I'll read the first part.
I'm waiting to see if there's more to this before I jump in.
Yeah, I think there is, and I'll read the first part. Sorry, I was wondering, Karen, how your conversation shifted from each institution, race, and we'll let Kendra go on.
Mm-hmm. gives me time to think about this before. Yeah.
And Kendra goes on, I worked at an HBCU and now a predominantly white institution, and I'm trying to negotiate the conversation in tutor education, or this conversation in tutor education.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go ahead and start talking to this, and if there's more to come from this, then I'll just incorporate that in. I think some important lessons I learned early on at Trinity and at Morgan State is to not assume that just because the student population is very diverse, that they necessarily have, that those students have any better preparation for talking across different racial groups, and even within the diversity of different racial groups. The experiences, and this is what I loved about working at an HBCU, is that the population was so diverse even within what from the outside could look like a pretty homogeneous population. There were students from suburban communities, rural communities, urban communities. There were international students. There were students from, especially coming from New York, who were coming from very much more diverse communities than what Morgan even was and what Baltimore was. So what I learned to do is just to present, here, we have a diverse institution, we have diverse racial groups. How do you engage with it, and start with where the students are, not assume that I could read what a student's ability or willingness to engage in these conversations was based on my superficial reading of their background. And I've been working on ways to present frameworks for which that would open up the entry point. It would be sort of not really neutral, but an open starting place for all people depending on where they come from. What that's worked for me is that I tend to use James Paul G's work on discourses and discourses identity kits, and then use that as a way for talking about what we bring to the conversation and build out from there, so that if students can have a chance to reflect on their own experience as well as each other's. And in Southern California, my institution here is Hispanic serving, but it's pretty diverse, and students here tend to think that because they're living in a diverse environment that they don't really have racism at play, or that they know how to deal with these things. And so I always kind of approach it gingerly. I don't go in and say, yeah, we need to have this conversation a certain kind of way, but let's open it up. And with any population, I haven't ever taught at a predominantly white institution, so I can't speak to that experience and what that's like in opening these conversations up. But I think finding that place where all students can enter from a point of self-reflection and then build out from there has worked for me across these different institutions. I'm reading what C. Greenlee is saying. The issue of remediation is huge at Cal State. Our campus and a lot of campuses are working against that in a lot of ways by developing stretch composition and directed self-placement, and we're trying to change the discourse around remediation. But that is a huge, huge issue. In my tutor education course right now, I have some students who took the first year, the stretch program, where before we had directed self-placement, which allows students to place themselves into the course. Before we had that, they were placed into it by a timed impromptu writing essay, and they were placed into the three-quarter stretch, which was perceived as remedial even though it's not designed as remedial. And so they've done a lot of good work in the Writing Center community and presenting at 4Cs about remediation, but that's a huge issue here as well. I don't know if, Laura, you want to jump into some of this?
Sure. All of my teaching, well, most of my teaching has been at predominantly white institutions. And my approach to tutor education has shifted over time. And what I have found is rather than starting where the students are, I start really, really high level. And I usually start with definitions because students, many of the students in my experience are understand race only in terms of individual moments of bigotry and don't know either how to conceptualize or just how to talk about institutionalized or systemic racism. And I find that when the conversation is limited to the individual prejudice, that people get defensive and people only focus on what they have experienced or what they can see from their narrow perspective. And so I spend a lot of time talking about what is the difference between racial prejudice versus racism when power is introduced, and then institutionalized racism, and then systemic racism, so people can see the broader picture and then can talk about things where people at once are invited to see how they're implicated in the broader systems, but can also talk about it in a way where they're not immediately on the defensive and are more likely to engage in depth. And so I start sort of big there, and then little by little, students sort of open up about their individual experiences within some of the systems that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think Laura and I have very similar philosophical approaches that we work at the institutional and broader level. We have slightly different ways of going about that, but that's the work in my tutor education course as well, as to work at seeing these things as institutional. So I draw on a lot of writing center critiques. Nancy Grimm's work has been really useful for unpacking some of that, to unpack the different layers of power that are operating when we get down to sitting one-on-one with a student. So I see Greenleaf's talking about students coming to him specifically, or him or her, I don't know, I'm sorry, because he or she is black. And so in trying to work through why that is, try to unpack some of the social and institutional power dynamics that are happening to lead to that kind of circumstance. And so then how might we address that as a writing center as a whole? How might an individual tutor respond and think about the dynamics that are happening there? Yeah.
Yeah, we had a similar, at my previous institution, a number of my African American tutors came to me to share that that there had been what they were calling this, an underground writing center happening, and that a lot of other African American students on campus were reaching out to them for tutoring, but were not willing to go into the space. And even though they were developing strong relationships with these particular tutors, would not meet them in the space. I had some really good conversations with these tutors about what does this mean, what is this saying about the center, what is this saying about the broader institution, because even if in the center we try to value in action what it means to be an anti-racist center, we can't guarantee their safety in that space, and we can't control or predict how other students who are in the center are going to perceive the students coming. That there's such a broader context in which these relationships and choices are happening, that it can't be addressed in an individual level of, oh, well, you should convince them to come to the center, or oh, you shouldn't do that, or oh, let's just continue it this way. That it's a broader institutional question for the entire campus. What's the climate that's creating the circumstances that are leading students to need to make these choices?
And yeah, Eric has said down there, I've had that experience too. The space is in no man's land. And then seeing Greenlee again, yes. And while we talk about the challenges at ESL, on ESL students, it started to talk about the issues about U.S. citizens, English native speakers from marginalized groups, and I believe that was one of the chapters. Also in your introduction, you talk about that as it's specifically talking about how oftentimes ESL or non-native speakers are privileged beyond native speakers in a center, or maybe not even in the center, but in our overall discussion in the Writing Center community.
Hey, Eric.
Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Trying to
okay.
orient myself
Yes,
so
we can
people
hear you.
shift around.
Definitely, cool. Thank you. Thank you for coming on, Eric.
No problem. It might have been an accident, but I'm glad I'm here.
Did you want to say more about your experience?
I actually did want to talk for a second, and I want to kind of go backwards a little bit, even farther backwards than the start of this conversation, and maybe clarify what the actual fears of students of color are. All right. I think we're assuming that we all know what those fears are, why students are afraid to come into the center, or they're afraid to work with a tutor who doesn't look like them or have the same experience. I was wondering if we could clarify some of those reasons. Not all, but at least some, and start from there.
Okay.
Right. Well, I think you're right that we don't really know. I mean, I'm not currently directing the Writing Center, but one of my research projects that I would love to be able to do at this institution is to try to figure out how to talk to students who don't go to the Writing Center, and to talk to them about it, because I think you're right that we can assume some of the reasons, but, and that some of those reasons might be on point, but without talking to the students themselves, I think we have an impartial or a partial picture. In my institution, where I am now, I think the issues of remediation are huge, and the perceptions that, it's what's been dogging writing centers for decades is that the perception that if you go to the Writing Center, you're a bad writer. And when you're working in a context where there's a high stigmatization of remedial writers, and where that's looped around non-native or multilingual students. We have a high population of students who speak Spanish as a first, or learn Spanish and English together. A lot of students who are English-only speakers, but are perceived as Spanish speakers. There's all kinds of things that are tangled up there that I try to tease out in talking to my students in my classes. That gives me a hint of it, but that's a piece of it, I'm sure, but not all of it. And I'm sure Laura, I don't know if you were able to untangle some of that in your circumstance.
I've held conversations with students who have shared, their thoughts with me. I'm assuming that these are partial. That the information that I have is partial. But it echoes what you're saying, that there's a lot of concern about how will I be perceived by other people in the room. That even if I have a good rapport with my tutor, who are the other students coming into the center? What are they going to think about me? What am I going to encounter there? And by and large, if their experiences in the broader campus, in the classroom, in the dorms, and student organizations have suggested that certain spaces are unsafe, it's a smart tactic to be cautious about avoiding this unknown space as well. I'm going to stop there.
Does that speak to your question, Eric?
It definitely speaks to it. I don't want to hog this whole conference either. It definitely does speak to it. I think there are two tracks we can go on here of thought. One is, the tutor approaching the session with his or her own perceptions of the student of color, and the student of color's own pressure to, in a sense, represent his or her entire group. So there's less pressure if you walk in as an individual. There's more if you walk in with this, I am the ambassador for this race, walking in here now, and whatever you do is a reflection on them. I've seen that as a factor that, in my experience, hasn't been talked about as much as other things. So I don't know. I'm just to answer your question. Those are some of the things that I've seen going on.
Yeah.
Sorry, addressing tutors is one thing. I mean, that's what the training is about. You can bring up these ideas, you can talk about them, and they're better. They have a little bit more knowledge about it, and they take the theory and work it out in practice. The other part, the students and what they represent to themselves, is a much bigger issue. I don't know if that's addressed by any of you in your work.
In some ways, it mimics the same question about, when I hear people talk about how do we diversify our centers themselves, how do we diversify our staff, how do we make sure that our staff is representative of the broader institution. And I think people problematically focus a lot of attention on, well, just how do we recruit let's reach out and make sure we've got our quota of certain populations of students. And it raises the same problematic questions of why would I want to go in to a space having to sort of be the representative of my group in the writing center. And in, more anecdotally in conversations after conferences, I've talked with other directors who are wrestling with these questions and how to have conversations in the classes. And I think a lot of directors or discussion facilitators will misguidedly start conversations that are asking people to sort of identify who they are in this, that they're sort of implicitly calling, so tell me, so-and-so, what is the African American experience in the center? That it's, we don't know how to even start a conversation about the conversations, the questions that's being raised.
I think one of the things, Eric, that I see happening at my institution with some of us teaching in the writing courses is some of us are shifting to writing about writing or writing about literacy approaches, and I've done this in some of my own writing classes, and it's getting it. I'm working around to your issue in a roundabout way, but I have students writing and reading about writing and literacy and conducting research, and I address some of the same questions in those classes that I do in my tutor education classes, drawing on how are we positioned by discourse, how are we positioned within the institution, how are the kinds of literacies we bring to the table, how do they shape us, and how do we reshape them. And some of my colleagues doing this work, especially in the first-year comp program and the stretch program, are having this within the context of how are you positioned by an institution that designates you as a remedial writer, even though you come in with the same qualifications as students who were designated as non-remedial, but yet you had a bad day and did poorly on a test, and thus you were labeled remedial. And what does that have to do? How does that intersect with race and class and first generation? So it's having those conversations, I think, is getting at some of the issues you're raising about what does it mean to walk into the Writing Center as a representative of a race, when you're operating in that kind of racialized, remedialized, kind of politicized institution, as we all are, but to address those questions. And it's not happening in a systemic enough way that would, it's happening in pockets within our program, I think, but I'm interested to see where we're going to take this, because we do have some students coming out of these courses who are entering the conversation in a very different place, and then they're coming to the Writing Center tutor education course from a very different place, and bringing that with them and reaching out to their peer groups to change. I don't know where it's going to go, but that's kind of what we're doing here.
Okay.
I look at these questions. There's the sort of on the ground, and then there's the big picture. Sort of the institutionalized question. I'm thinking. In our collection, Michelle Johnson has a really compelling chapter on racial literacy in the Writing Center, and is looking at what happens when students who are taking a racial literacy class and are learning to really engage purposefully in conversations about race go to the Writing Center and encounter a tutor who hasn't, and what happens. And so, it raises questions about what kind of education and preparation do our tutors need to be creating a space that makes it easier for students to engage in these conversations. At the same time, I think it's problematic to leave the solutions at the level of individual students and tutor education courses and centers. And I'm really interested in looking at questions of how the Writing Center is working within the broader institution to change. At the NUCA conference recently at the University of New Hampshire, Janet gave a collaborative keynote address with her partner in the Writing Across the Curriculum program, and was talking about initiatives that they had made so that what they were learning about students' experiences in the Writing Center, they could use their partnership as a way to start to enact broader institutional change, so that the Writing Across the Curriculum director, who works with faculty, has a different lens and a different way into the institution, and is able to change faculty development initiatives so that faculty were teaching differently and creating classes that students were having different experiences in, so that by the time they're getting to the Writing Center, it's coming in a different context. And then ideally from that kind of partnership, you think about how can a number of people get together to enact policy changes. How do we change what the writing curriculum is on campus? How do we change what different requirements are? How do we, how do we take what we see happening, on the ground, an individual student, her experience walking into the center, and reach the highest levels possible to start to change the context that's compelling, or that's creating her individual experience.
Sure. I find it's also ideal to try to work with as many people across the curriculum as possible, to either do workshops or talk to people for faculty development or things like that. It also brings me back to the reference to James G. earlier, and this idea of identity kit and the discourse as a club, or something like that, or as I saw a huge rolling of the eyes for a second.
There's more thinking, like I don't quite conceptualize what he's saying is a club is. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
He uses the term club, and
yeah.
And so does Jerry Graff. So let's look at that.
Yeah.
I think Graff is perhaps a more palatable version of G when it comes to undergraduates. I try to have my tutors start off with these kinds of talks of how students are supposed to fit into academic discourse.
Right, okay, there's it.
And I think that is a foundation, and as perhaps maybe a goal for all students, if placed in the beginning of their education, could do wonders. Now, not a lot of schools are open to that kind of situation, and I see that some people are thinking about working with different departments via the workshop situation or something like that. That's not always possible, though. Right. Do any of you or people on the list have experience with working with other departments and workshops about general academic writing, and how has that helped? I would love to hear that, if I'm being clear.
Could you say that again real quick? My brain went somewhere else for half a second. The very last part about working with others.
People have had experiences working with departments on talking about academic discourse in general, and how that may have helped issues like this, race and writing centers. I don't know.
In my experience, at least at my previous institution, it was harder to go sort of approach formal units on campus, so sort of approaching a particular department to talk about it, it was harder to get the buy-in. Instead, it was more one-by-one relationship building until you had built a critical mass of people who wanted to get together. So my route was to do things like I led a year-long faculty seminar in teaching writing, and people elected to participate in that, and then through that began conversations. I put together a panel with several of my colleagues of non-native English speakers talking about their experience in the classroom. They sat on a panel, and faculty were invited to come and listen, which was sort of the first time on campus I think there had ever been any space for that to happen. And so again, it was, voluntary. People who were interested came and sat in on that. And I've hosted other sort of different topics and conversations and invited people to come in. But I didn't have a lot of success just showing up at a department.
Yeah. At our campus, we're lucky to have one of our compositionists who's now directing the Teaching and Learning Center. So we have a great group of compositionists who are all kind of a broad ilk, who share a lot of philosophical placements. And so having her placed in that position, she's working at driving forward conversations in these kinds of ways. And she's not the first of our compositionists to do this work. My predecessor, Carol Haviland, has done a lot of faculty development work around writing across the curriculum. I've done some workshops. The business school asked me to come in and do some workshops for international students, and they kind of assumed, I think at the start, that it was going to be a workshop to tell students how to not make mistakes in their writing. And sometimes the students come in and want me to tell them how to not make mistakes in their writing, and I work at developing the workshops to explain, why that's kind of a problematic assumption to start with, and try to develop workshops that are productive and useful for them, but that don't perpetuate those particular ideas about international students. So there's a lot of that going on. For myself personally, I need to get out there more. I'm beginning to get out across the campus a little bit more, but I think that Laura is really correct in thinking that we need to focus on the bigger picture. We've done that within comp and trying to move away from remediation for first-year comp, but also just faculty outreach. There's huge conversations going on around accreditation or assessment and outcomes assessment on campus. So we're trying to drive, as compositionists, position ourselves within those conversations to shape the way that writing is construed in those conversations about outcomes assessment, so that outcomes assessment isn't constructed as having grammatically perfect writing that shows no trace of racial, ethnic, class, gender, nationality, those kinds of things, that we have a richer dynamic of that. But it's a slow and cumbersome and unwieldy process, as you, I'm sure, know.
Yes.
Well,
sorry, I really wasn't rolling my eyes at you. I was thinking. I
got one then that follows right along with what you're talking about, because it's interesting. Here we are, talking about this issue, and what happens is now we're suddenly talking about international students again. Is there a conversation about, say, Black English, or how Latinos, Hispanics are their language use is on university campuses or colleges? I can't think of one.
We're reading in my class next week. We're reading Rashawn's chapter from the book. And I found that even though very few of my students at this institution are African American, the students who are coming with multilingual backgrounds and sort of different kinds of Englishes, maybe shaped more by Spanish than African American English, they still really respond to that chapter. And we have some really rich conversations, and it's about the possibilities of code meshing that Rashawn offers, and also the limits of what students can do. Always it comes, whether it's undergrads or grad students, the conversation comes back to, well, Rashawn can write this chapter because he's already made it. As a student, what was my possibility? What are my options for doing this kind of work, and being able to make it through? And when I work with this, so we have those conversations in all the courses where I've read this. about that. So it's this sort of frustrating point of the field is arguing for this kind of code meshing and pushing our writing forward and this kind of translingual, multilingual pedagogy, but students very, very correctly note that their professor in history is not going to be down with a code meshed essay, you know, and their other professors are not, generally speaking, going to be okay with that, so they're stuck in the same place, and they, I think, get a little irritated with me.
No, I understand that irritation too,
Yeah.
and I would, I mean, I'm not trying to come down on Rashawn or anything
No.
like that at all, but I mean, there are writers who have similar ideas, but do appreciate the context of a writing center and writing center pedagogy, and see the writing center situation as a place where people can come in and do what Patricia Bazell calls hybrid discourse, which is not so much code meshing as it is taking different rhetorical strategies and you know, hybridizing them with typical academic discourse. I have a little more success with that concept, because that concept goes back to G again and Jerry Graff and this idea of maybe not a general, well, for this particular situation, a general academic discourse, and how, you know, we can use certain rhetorical tactics given certain situations appropriately while maintaining our voices and doing what our professors, you know, will appreciate. Now, I think there are steps between where Rashawn is and where the students are that aren't being talked about. And certain articles are talking about that. Specifically, Bazell's hybrid discourse, what, why, and how. That's a good one to start. FYI. I'm done talking.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that some of the discussions in the field around language diversity really, you know, present a very impoverished view on what language is. That so much attention is spent on grammar or vocabulary, and not looking at rhetoric, you know, and not looking at all the other ways that we use language and all the different depths of language. And I think part of that, you know, I see racial implications with that, and I argue this in a part of one of my chapters in the book, that English, or what people consider standard English, really is nothing other than not what people see as not standard English. And so if somebody is unaware of you know, certain rhetorical practices in one language, aren't aware of that, they don't know how to identify it, and therefore they don't know how to identify it in their own language either. And so the argument, you know, people get hung up on, you know, a particular usage of a particular word or a particular grammar, and then that becomes really scary, but they don't look at other ways that the language could be used. So in a way, you know, teaching code meshing or you know, blending different discourses, you can be very successful with that and in a way fly under the radar if your reader doesn't even recognize that you're using tools from a different discourse. And so I think that could be a viable starting point for starting to change how language is used in the academy.
Okay.
We're got about 5 minutes left, but I want to kind of get back to where we started with Kendra's ideas, because like I said, she'd gotten on before and we were talking, and I'll just sum what she had said at the beginning, or before you all got here. She was using Grimm's essay in the text to start a discussion, and then noted that they didn't believe that racism existed in covert ways, but after our discussion they changed. I'm thinking in terms of what other means do you think we could use your book in staff education situations, discussions with our staff? You know, do you have any, I don't want to say handy guides but just general ideas? How can we make use of this text better? I'm adding it to my writing center class in the fall. Yeah, for what that's worth, but I want some ideas, I guess, on what I could do in the classroom to make use of it.
Well, a couple of thoughts. I think people will use it differently, and I don't think there is one right way to use it. Um, I, I think part of it, we'd hope that it wouldn't be used at an isolated moment or as the only text. Our point was not to represent all of what is to be said about racism and the Writing Center, but instead to be a catalyst for continued conversation. And so ideally, several chapters would be used throughout the term, and that's a work of in talking about the Writing Center and what a Writing Center is and what it's there for and what it could be and what it might become, and different practices that tutors can use, that the book be used is interwoven throughout those discussions. And our hope is also that it's not limited to tutor education, and that certainly tutors can learn from it, but that it's speaking to also faculty and directors and teaching faculty and administrators, and that different chapters, I think, will resonate differently depending on people's role in the institution and where they are right now in their careers in relationship to writing centers. And so in a way, it's what is going to speak to your particular staff.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, for me, it's like it's to break the silence, because that's one of the most striking things about texts like this. And I hope I join the band that's Frankie Kahn, as we talked about that. And next time we're going to be talking about Facing the Center, Harry Denny, or Victor Villanueva's work. Anytime we can break that silence, because it's palpable. I mean, the first time I bring up race issues in class, or even gender issues, the silence just comes over everybody and nobody wants to talk. And it is that fear that you talk about, but you just have to sort of forge ahead and talk. And what's awesome is I think we've done a lot of great talking today, and I'm glad that we've had this discussion. It's been an excellent one. But do you have in closing, do you have anything to say for us, or ideas, or anything you haven't said, or anything you want to sum up on? And if anybody out in the text world there wants to add something, please go right ahead too.
I'd just like to sort of extend one of Laura's points about this not being the only book or the only text. That I really see a lot of potential with the way that different chapters have opened up conversations, but certainly not said everything there is to say on particular topics. And in sort of flipping through the book before this conversation, I was particularly looking at the chapter on cross-racial interaction, I think it was, and then the chapter following that on racial literacy that Laura mentioned earlier. And I think those two chapters are, in particular, as many other chapters are great for saying, okay, here's what these researchers found in these institutions. And I think the chapter on cross-racial interaction was at some Hispanic serving institutions. So they were working with particular kind of demographics there that don't pertain across different institution types. And to have working with tutors to say, okay, here's the conversation or here's what's going on here, what's happening in our institution, how might we replicate this research, add to the conversation, see what's going on, use it as sort of an internal conversation point, as well as building back out to the field and contributing to the field. What we really want to see from this book is the kind of conversations that it opens up, but also continued contributions to the field, so that people can pick up on where the authors in the book left off and add to it and enrich the conversation from there, the published conversation as well as these face-to-face textual conversations.
Do you think, it's from Utah State Press, do you think there's going to be a new addition to it that would address some of the concerns? I was reading some of the reviews and indicating that it was perhaps limited in viewpoint. Do you think there'll be a new edition that'll address some of those, or is it selling well enough? I guess.
Ways to answer that. I mean, I think we're so early into this one coming out that we're diving into the conversations that this one produced, but wouldn't say no to continuing on the project. But I think I think a thing that we really want to stress where we disagree with some of the criticism that I think that you're referencing about what's represented in the book, is that the purpose of the book is not to represent everyone's positions and experiences. I don't think it's possible to, and I don't know that that would be the most useful use of such a book. That our goal is really to make the case that institutionalized racism exists and is a problem that our field needs to take on, and to provide models of how some people are diving into the conversation and not shying away from it, or out of fear. And so the goal is that this is one more big piece of a conversation moving forward that people, hopefully whether they agree or disagree with the book, or with some of the arguments in the book, will take it and move forward with it and engage with it. So we can't possibly represent every single racial group, and even if every racial group is represented, I think it's false to assume. If we'd written an entire book on one racial group, you can't assume that everybody from that racial group is going to identify with the experiences in that book. And so instead, what we'd be interested in, if there are concerns that the argument hasn't been made that institutionalized racism exists and is a problem, or that race has been theorized ineffectively in the book to move forward with the conversation. That was our goal. Do you want to add?
And I've been trying to follow this conversation that's happening in text below us while we're talking, and I see that there's these connections happening and folks connecting in particular about writing centers and HBCUs, and that was an area I began to head into when I was at Morgan, and because I shifted institutions, shifted my focus, and there needs to be so much more conversation and work on that area, so I'm hoping these connections that are happening while this conversation is going on really move someplace, and that's really, whether there's an addition that sort of like, Writing Centers in the News to Racism, the sequel, happens, what I imagine happening is really work that says, okay, here's some interesting theoretical work. Laura's saying, we're trying not to represent experiences, but trying to get at theorizing race in Writing Center in a different kind of way, and then to take that and see what's useful from it and move it into different kinds of contexts where you can still not ever represent the whole of any kind of groups or institutional types institution. I imagine, HBCUs are such a dynamic, diverse kind of institution that even if you've got a great group of people together, they're still going to be limited in what they can represent in their work, but they can move the conversation forward there where there's really not anything happening yet, because I think there's some important work happening about, race and racism in HBCUs that really needs to get out there.
And yeah, as far as other areas go, if you're at IWCA or NCPTW, the National Conference on Peer Tutoring and Writing, the anti-racism SIG meets rather regularly there. We do have a listserv, but I cannot. I know it's a Yahoo list, but I don't know how to log into it or how to get people on it. But I think, this conversation is great, and I think, if we just, as you say, in your subtitle, I think there is, ultimately we want to try to build a sustainable community where we can talk about this and work on and discuss and work through things. But thank you, Karen and Laura, for excellent discussion, and thank you everybody in the audience, and Eric for coming on with us up here on top. It's been an excellent discussion, and it will be archived. It'll probably be up in a few days. If you saw my post to W Center, the other discussions we've had have also been posted there. This has been one of the best discussions yet. Everybody's been participatory, and I'm really excited to hopefully we can keep talking about this. And if you have any ideas of things you want to talk about in a situation like this, just let me know. But thank you all again, and I hope you have an excellent afternoon and that spring has finally come wherever you are.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Clint, again
Very
for
much.
hosting us.
Yes, and thanks to all who showed up to participate. It's
Yes.
really getting to talk to everyone.
Great. Bye.
Bye. Adios.